Hi, I'm Sarah.
And I'm Rena, and welcome to
Biopic, a podcast story. This is a podcast where we dissect the good, bad, ugly, and absurd of this specific genre of motion picture, the biopic. If you want to learn more about us, our scoring system, and how we choose movies, please check out our special introductory episode titled Introduction, Who Are We and What Are We Doing?
Sarah. What movie will we be talking about in this special out-of-sequence emergency trailer episode?
We are breaking in to drop an emergency episode on the Michael trailer. It's here, people.
You may be wondering, why are we doing an emergency episode about a trailer for a John Travolta film from 1996 about the Archangel Michael showing up on Earth, which I already sat through on an airplane flight back before seatback viewing gave us choices about what to watch on flights. No, we are talking about the other Michael, the rather delayed Michael Jackson biopic starring his nephew Jafar Jackson, which is now slated to arrive in April of 2026, which I think might be at least its third release date so far.
Rena, can you give us the trigger warning?
This movie trailer and emergency episode contain depictions of and/or references to child abuse, plastic surgery, seizures, various tacky trends of the 70s and 80s. This episode is dedicated to Porygon the Pokemon, who is number 137 in the first generation Pokemon deck. The reasons for this tribute to Porygon will become apparent later in the episode.
Yes. Rena, can you give us the spoiler warning?
Spoiler warning. We are going to spoil everything, including possibly the major plot points in works of narrative art having nothing to do with this particular movie. Consider yourself warned.
Some of the sources we used in this episode include Variety's coverage of the trailer, some articles from Pajiba, and from all around the internet. I did more research than I care to admit on this episode, and I asked Claude a bunch of statistical questions, which will become clear very soon. So, okay, it's coming. We're going to make a couple of observations and guesses about what's going to happen here. This is going to be a movie that really pushes the boundaries of hagiography and the pitfalls of making a movie that demands the estate's engagement. And it's an estate that is dedicated to villainizing 12-year-old boys because money.
Michael is likely to be less enjoyable than the Jackson 5 miniseries that aired in the 90s, which is a forgotten treasure. It has Angela Bassett as Katherine Jackson. It has a lot of fun little performances in it, and nothing Angela Bassett does is ever a fun little performance. But it's campy, it's fun. You see so many phases of the Jackson 5. You see Randy's journey to finally being valued. And it has this one line that is burned into my soul that is magical, that I think about at least 6 or 7 times a year. This line that I think of whenever I see someone being super whack. And it's a line, and I don't know if this is the exact line, and I almost don't want to watch this again because I don't want to know. There's a scene where the boys are all out on tour, and LaToya Jackson is complaining about something, and someone says to her with perfect delivery, "Why you gots to be so ugly, LaToya?" And like, whenever someone is just driving me nuts with being a real pain, like that line pops into my head. "Why you gots to be so ugly, LaToya?" I think it is like a lost treasure that should go on a top 100 single line delivery list thing, if such a thing exists. It's amazing. The Jackson 5 miniseries is at least fun. I don't think this will be much fun.
I think there's a number of reasons why it's clear how unexamined this film is going to be in terms of how it looks at its characters. The first of which is the actor playing Michael Jackson is his goddamn nephew. That to me is one red flag that this movie is not going to even come close to interrogating its subject. Or
does MJ's nephew have any prior screen credits?
This is his first movie. He has a couple of songs that he has released. I don't know what they are, because I am not down with the kids. And fun fact, Michael's mother, Katherine Jackson, was quoted as approving of the casting, saying he embodies her son.
I don't think Michael Jackson's spirit should be trapped in anyone's body, thus
No.
embodying him, least of all someone that he would have hopefully had some non-creepy affection for.
He is a son of Jermaine, brother
Okay.
to Your Majesty. No.
The performance seems awkward from the very little I could see in the trailer. Honestly, out of all of the currently breathing actors that I've seen, the only one ever to give me he should be a young Michael Jackson vibes is Henry Hunter Hall, who we saw in Harriet, and he's probably a bit too old now.
I can't think of an actor who should play MJ because he did take on a sort of alien-like energy. Let's start off here. I'm going to be a little cynical in this episode about money. It's time for a little economics lesson from a girl whose greatest academic triumph is the time I declared One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest a misogynist work of art aimed directly at men's worst fears, which is to say, I don't understand money. But I'm about to throw some money numbers at you to try and explain why this movie exists. And also just explain Michael Jackson in general here. During the time window of 1982 through 1984, Thriller, Michael Jackson's album alone, captured at least 1.4% of all U.S. long play format sales during that period, which is an extraordinary achievement for a single artist album.
I think this means that every household in the US had an average of at least one copy of Thriller, and that possibly everyone on the planet, even in very repressive countries, had at least heard Thriller. Otherwise, it means that Americans were building houses out of stacks of Thriller albums.
What bears up under scrutiny is that every household in this country probably had a copy of Thriller. I haven't been to the house that was built with Thriller albums, but I'm sure that it's out there. This is America. But I don't make the math rules. Michael Jackson's financial impact has been enormous both during his life and after. In the year following his death, that was in 2009, his estate generated over $1 billion in revenue from music, publishing, merchandise, and the film that they made right before his death titled This Is It, which is a documentary about him touring and suffering under the weight of a painkiller addiction. The state earns about $75 million annually from ongoing music sales and streams. Also in 2024, Sony valued his catalog at over $1.2 billion when they purchased a stake in it, and has paid the Jackson estate more than $2 billion through various deals over the years. Sony owns 50%, and the other 50% is owned by the MJ estate. Now, curiously, we also have a stat in here that a holding company called Primary Wave also gets a share of his estate rights at under 10%.
Sarah, I need you to clarify the numbers here. 50 plus 50 plus 10 adds up to 110. The percentages don't work.
I agree with you, and I cannot clarify. The internet gave me this information. I'm just assuming that Primary Wave probably takes off the top of the Jackson estate. Primary beneficiaries, MJ's children and his mother, Katherine Jackson. According to People magazine, Katherine Jackson has received more than $55 million from the estate since 2009. Co-executors of his estate are a man named John Branca and John McLean, who is a music executive. John Branca is a character in this film, and he is played by Miles Teller. And I'm wondering, how do you think he's going to come off in this movie?
I think he's going to come across as a saint who had nothing but good intentions for his client's well-being. The John McClane that you mentioned spells it differently from the Bruce Willis character in Die Hard.
Yes, these are two different guys.
Well, I'm sure that this John McClane always has a clean undershirt.
Oh, for sure.
About Michael Jackson's earnings during the peak years of his career as a solo artist. From 1982 to 1984, Jackson earned $134 million in the 2 years after the release of Thriller, $306 million adjusted for inflation. Between 1985 and 1987, Michael Jackson earned between 50 and 100 million per year through touring, record sales, endorsements, and merchandise. In 1988, during the peak of the Bad Tour, Jackson earned $125 million in 1988 dollars, which adjusts to $247 million today. In 1989, his annual earnings were estimated at $125 million, and his next tour in 1987 to 1989, that tour grossed $125 million total. This is what Sarah found on the internet.
So he became almost a billionaire over an 8-year period. This is a remarkable concentration of wealth and one person's earnings equivalent to the lifetime work of 1,000 employees during that era. What is the significance? There's always been a lot of money riding on pretending that everything about Michael Jackson is A-okay, pretending that his victims are not real, that there were no crimes happening and crimes never happened. Looking the other way was far easier than addressing the issue because there was so much goddamn money. And here we are in the garbage year of our Lord 2025, and we're going to make some more money for the MJ estate. And let's be real, it's complicated because he is a once-in-a-lifetime artist. Thriller is a life-altering album. There's no one like him before, and there will never be anyone like him again. I want to be really careful where I put the blame on this because there are so many people who have profited from the misery he created. And MJ himself is an untreated victim, and we see that so often predators are victims first. There's a lot of great actors in this. Coleman Domingo, Nia Long, Laura Harrier, Derek Luke, because actors need money and they need work, and in particular, Black actors are underutilized and marginalized in the film industry. So it's not as simple as saying, well, screw you for being part of this. And I'm going to quote Chris Cabin from We Hate Movies. I feel as if I have been shat out of something, contemplating like the grotesque capitalist cynicism of this motion picture.
Do you want to hear something scarier than Thriller or Michael's Nose 10 Surgeries In? I did not watch the Thriller video until I was in my 20s.
How? You and I, we were born 6 weeks apart, and I saw that video approximately 2,000 times.
Mm-hmm.
How were you able to avoid it? We lived in a monoculture in the 80s. So were you in a cult that I didn't know about? In which case we have to talk about that.
Well, the closest I come to being in a cult is that I was born into a place called Northeastern Jewish Academia. But, and I guess this lends some plausibility to this podcast's origin story, which is that I am a Victorian doll that you found in an attic and reanimated into a real girl, which is in itself a retcon of that our mothers went to Ithaca College together. The way that I managed to reach my 20s without seeing the Thriller video is my family did not have cable. My parents did not get cable until that point in the 2010s when they took everything off the lines and you had to get cable to have TV at all. And our not having cable meant that we definitely did not have MTV. But in addition, I was not allowed to watch weekend morning cartoons. My parents were basically against us seeing anything that seemed stupid. I could maybe watch one episode of The Cosby Show or later The Wonder Years. In a week, I was allowed to watch Sesame Street, Mr. Rogers, Square One, and that Anne of Green Gables miniseries that was made in Canada, where the guy playing Gilbert is really cute and he says "a boot" in this just really delightful way. The only things my parents watched were Masterpiece Theater and the NBC Nightly News with Tom Brokaw. I was a miserable object of derision in school because the other children would talk about things that they had seen on TV and on cable, and I was completely out to sea, having no idea what they were talking about, on top of my cluster of neurodivergencies that nobody had any idea how to diagnose or treat properly in the 1980s. I knew who Michael Jackson was. I was aware of certain moments and images in the Thriller video, like the zombie dance and like that he stands on his toes and the red jacket. I don't think I could have told you exactly where they were from or the significance. And In fact, I had no idea that anything at all was happening in current popular music since the Beatles vinyls in our house until the day in middle school that I opened the New York Times and read that Kurt Cobain had committed suicide, and I immediately dove headlong into the remains of grunge, which was already winding down in the spring of '94. I understood that it was very cool that Nevermind had knocked Dangerous out of the #1 spot in the Billboard charts, because I immediately started buying music magazines. I had to smuggle Spin home because my mother didn't like it. So because allowances were like, you could buy maybe one CD a week in the 90s, that meant that I could be a fan of something without having heard it. So I just immediately absorbed whatever attitude I saw. And I deemed from this, with the narrow-mindedness of a teenager desperate to be cool, I assumed that Michael Jackson was old time and he sucked along with anything that included synthesizers. Of course I was wrong, but this lasted a few years. In the meantime, the internet was slow and choppy, so I did not watch the entire Thriller video aside from random clips until some point in my 20s when the whole thing was available to view on the internet at a decent quality that wouldn't break down, and it occurred to me, Michael Jackson's Thriller video is a gap in my pop cultural education that I must fill post-haste.
Um, I missed grunge entirely because I was listening to Sondheim. So I have that cultural blind spot. I should also mention the Thriller video is directed by noted involuntary manslaughterer John Landis. I'm going to be completely contrary to you here. Thriller is actually part of some of my earliest memories. Um, from being alive, along with the Big Chill soundtrack. I remember very distinctly listening to the tape recordings of those albums in the car on car trips with my parents.
Yeah, I love it now. I didn't get to hearing it until shockingly late. There are a number of people featured as characters in this movie who we've seen or will see again on this podcast, as well as actors. Some very good who we've talked about before, and I'd like to start calling them out now. For example, welcome back to the show, Quincy Jones. You were previously played by Lorenz Tate in Ray, and Lorenz Tate in Michael will be playing Berry Gordy.
What we have here is a wild ride if there were ever to be a cinematic universe that is shared for Lorenz Tate.
Yeah, so to give a rundown, we have Coleman Domingo, who was also in 42 and Lincoln and will be showing up at least another 3 times on this podcast as Joe Jackson. We have Nia Long as Katherine Jackson.
Nia Long is a lovely actress. My earliest memory of her is when she was on Guiding Light when I was a kid.
Aside from people playing Jacksons, we have Kat Graham as Diana Ross. I always think of Beyonce as the best Diana Ross. And then I remember that Dreamgirls was inspired by the Supremes, but is not a Supremes biopic.
It is not.
It gives Florence Ballard the happy ending she never got to have.
And also, I mentioned earlier, Laura Harrier is in this. She was in BlacKkKlansman. She's been in a ton of other stuff. She is like mind-bogglingly, blindingly beautiful. She's playing a woman named Suzanne de Passe, who was a incredible groundbreaker in the music industry. She started off as Berry Gordy's assistant in 1968 and became the head of her own company. She's a producer. She's a Harvard Business School case study. I do not have time to list off all the accomplishments, but they are insane and multitudinous, and we should be watching a movie about her.
We have a Steve Rubell who was played by Mike Myers in 54 and will be doing 54 at some point.
Great.
And Derek Luke is playing Johnnie Cochran, who we'll see again if we get to any of the OJ stuff, which I am not remotely looking forward to.
This is curious, and I am wondering if Derek Luke is going to make it into the final film, because, and we'll talk about this in a little bit, because Johnny was one of his lawyers when he was accused of child molestation for the first time in 1993. I thought that you were able to spot all of these people in the trailer, and I was furious because I couldn't suss out anything or anyone that was in the trailer. Like Reginald Val Johnson could have been in there, Air Bud, Jimmy Hoffa. Like, I couldn't tell. It was all coming at me so fast.
I got that from IMDb. And we have another Andy Warhol.
Great.
So Andy Warhol is now tied with John Hammond and Elvis Presley for the most appearances as a character in a biopic so far on this show, and he is in line to hit the record once we do Basquiat and Factory Girl.
You're going to fit right in with all the other predators in this movie, Andy.
Hopefully MLK will overtake him eventually. Also, and please interject if you have a comment here, Sarah. We have a Gladys Knight, a Dick Clark, a Robert Mapplethorpe, a Mick Jagger, a Halston, a Liza Minnelli, a John Lennon. Did Sean and Yoko sign off on this one? And a Sheryl Crow.
So, we are clearly going to be spending a little bit of time at Studio 54 at some point in this movie based on these real people that you have mentioned. I'm guessing those are going to be very brief because I looked at the actors who are playing these roles, and it's all like people who are not famous and are early in their career. I guess he's going to go to a hell party like we went to in The Doors. Also, Sheryl Crow was a backup singer for Michael on the Bad tour. So I'm very interested in how aggressively they're going to insert this meaningless detail into the film. I'm also curious if Tatum O'Neal is going to be showing up somewhere in this movie because they kind of dated-ish.
I noticed that they did not cast a Paul McCartney, which I'm only mentioning because I thought I saw someone who looked a little bit like 80s Paul in the trailer. This was probably just a different white guy, and I'm exhibiting ignorance in telling some kinds of white guys apart from each other on this one. I would venture that the lack of a Paul in the Thriller era scenes is due to Paul McCartney, who was on the Thriller album, being still alive and in full possession of his mental faculties.
I think that Paul would be litigious as hell about appearing in this.
I've seen Paul McCartney portrayed on film before, and we'll be seeing him a few times when we get to Backbeat, and also notably in the young John Lennon biopic Nowhere Boy, he is played by an actor who I can never remember his name, but in my head he is named that actor who always looks 12. That actor who always looks 12 has an impressive resume, including Game of Thrones, where he played Jojen Reed for a few seasons, and the Netflix series The Queen's Gambit. I'm wondering, are they going to pretend that John Lennon was still alive in 1984 and that he sang the duet on The Girl Is Mine?
All bets are off with this movie.
It's time to talk about the trailer itself. So we open on the Lionsgate credit. We blur to a focus of Michael's hands as he puts on the headphones, and a voice says, "I know you've been waiting a long time for this."
And then we have a title card, which says from the producer of Bohemian Rhapsody, which I'm like, that is a threat.
So we are in the Thriller sessions. We see some cards with the track order being moved around. And one of the things that was always remarkable to me about Thriller is it's 9 songs. Standard album length is usually 10 or 12 songs. And he just knew that it was perfect in that song order. So we see a montage of recording studio stuff, Quincy in the booth, followed by some body shots of Michael walking up to stuff and dancing. And this goes by in such quick flashes. I feel like every clip is so blink and you'll miss it that it reminds me of that first flash of Tyler Durden in Fight Club, where he's just there for an instant and someone pointed it out to me. And it was already my second time viewing the film and I'd missed it completely.
The Pazuzu insert shot in The Exorcist is longer than any moment of this trailer that we saw. It's all coming at you. I was actually concerned watching this over and over, trying to like suss out what I was seeing, that I was going to have a stroke like that time that Pokemon game came out in Japan in the 90s.
It's an episode. The Pokemon's name is Porygon, and I think it aired once, and there were complaints about it causing seizures. It's this red and blue Pokemon that like whirls rapidly in the air. And you can find it on YouTube now, I think. I don't medically advise you to go decide whether this thing causes seizures. I get that this is the teaser trailer and that the point is to try to show you clips of all the things that could be exciting, but the clips are so fast and so varied that whoever made the final cut must have been under an imperative to show as little actual acting from the scenes as possible while getting you keyed up. I am worried that I might be insulting people who suffer from seizures and fits. So apologies in advance to anyone with epilepsy or anyone with anything that otherwise causes seizures and fits, and to stroke victims. But I have a hunch that the marketing strategy for the Michael teaser trailer was to give the audience seizures, because based on the trailer, it would take brain damage to want to see this movie. And that might be the meanest thing I've ever been recorded saying on this podcast. It's also the reason why this episode is dedicated to Porygon the Pokemon.
I'm still back on like the fact that that episode is on YouTube, and like, why would you seek it out? What in the name of Faces of Death are we doing?
Sarah, I had a very smart reason for looking up that episode. I wanted to see if the Pokemon actually caused seizures.
Why did you do that?
I was curious. I was like, oh, come on. There's no way this thing actually causes seizures. And I didn't have a seizure.
This trailer should come with one of those flashing light warnings where they're like, this may cause you to suffer. Looking at this trailer and knowing the people involved with the making of this movie, I can't imagine that this is going to have any sort of insight. I think it's just going to go from set piece to and then, and it's going to like check all the boxes. I don't see this as being a particularly insightful film. I think this is all a stunt.
The montages in the Michael trailer go so neuron-bogglingly fast that the experience of watching it reminds me of Emily's Lament from Act 3 of Thornton Wilder's play Our Town. Sarah, can you please read this paraphrasing of Emily's farewell monologue in the spirit of the Juilliard audition that you were never allowed to give?
Let's really look at one another. It goes so fast. We don't have time to look at one another. I didn't realize. So all that was going on and we never noticed. Wait. One more look. Goodbye. Goodbye, world. Goodbye, Motown Studios. Mama and Papa. Goodbye, Tito. Goodbye, Jermaine. Goodbye, Janet. Goodbye, Marlon. Goodbye, Jackie. Goodbye to hands moving dials, and patent leather loafers, and Quincy and LaToya and Vincent Price, and sequins and spotlights and zombie makeup and moonwalking. Michael, are you too wonderful for anybody to realize you? Do any human beings ever realize Neverland while they live it? Every second?
The saints and the poets, they do some. The rest of us, not so much.
Okay.
I had thought that we might try to watch this thing and hit pause rapidly, but it's... So what are some things you remember seeing in these brief flashes?
I remember like the drama leading up to him like standing on his toes while he's moonwalking. I remember where he walks into a board meeting. I remember seeing his family for like a second. I remember the White Sox. A woman fainting.
Yes, I remember that too.
The other thing that really stands out, I guess we can get right to it now, is when we cut back to the studio with Q, that is Quincy, and we see his face.
So my first thought here on his voice is very, very high when he responds to Quincy in the booth. And I remember an interview with Lisa Marie Presley where she said that IRL Michael's voice was much lower when he was in private company, that he loved dirty jokes, and that he made her believe that together they could save the world.
Michael Jackson is one of those artists too who, like, I don't know how you can play him without reaching into parody, because like, and he's super tragic, but he is also ridiculous. And when they did that cutaway and he asks Q to dim the lights in that voice, I was just like, no, man, I can't.
The movie that I want is the one where Michael and Lisa Marie try to save each other, and they have some fantastic actress playing her, where it's equivalent to Cate Blanchett as Katharine Hepburn in The Aviator.
I don't want to see their intimate relationship. Also, she was deep into Scientology at that time, and I'm pretty sure she was trying to bag him as the ultimate recruit.
This breaks my heart because I want to believe that there was a tragic broken love story here. And you know what? That marriage still outlasted at least one contemporaneous 90210 cast member marriage that seemed way more normal.
I think you're thinking of Shannon Doherty's, and I've purchased milk that has held up longer than her marriage to Ashley Hamilton. Bless. I want to talk a little bit about the elephant in the room here, which is, of course, the delays that were happening on this film. I'm going to read from the website Pajiba, a website that is quite brilliant. There's a lot of great writing on there, and they just talked a little bit about some of the shit that this movie went through last year. And they write, the central question for any Michael Jackson biopic is whether it should address the child sex abuse allegations Jackson faced. Ignoring them would be disingenuous, as they cast a shadow over the last decade of his career. However, confronting them head-on could make the movie a tough sell. Screenwriter John Logan, working with the Michael Jackson estate, reportedly decided to tackle the allegations and use the film to refute them. The third act was set to focus on the accusations made by the Chandler family, whose 13-year-old son Jordan was the first to accuse Jackson. Jackson later settled with the family for $23 million, but the movie nevertheless was apparently going to challenge the Chandlers' credibility and poke holes in their account. This third act, considered the backbone of the film, was shot, and the movie, initially slated for an April release, had moved into post-production. However, according to Puck, the release had been pushed to October 2025, which has obviously been pushed again, for a major reason. A clause in the settlement contract, overlooked by everyone, prohibits the Jacksons from dramatizing the Chandler family or their story. Oops. So this is why I don't know that Derek Luke is going to make it into the final movie. And from a viewing art perspective, I'm very curious how this movie is going to end and be reshaped, because it seems like they're going to be unable to show Michael in any light that isn't like purely beatific. And I think this is going to make Reagan look like Cobb. 2 previous episodes. What conflicts can they set up? Like, I guess that his dad can continue to be like the big baddie. But as I said, MJ started as a victim and became a predator. And that's awful. It could be unpacked in a really interesting way if someone wanted to make that movie. Michael Jackson loved Peter Pan, as we all know, but he was really like Rumpelstiltskin at a certain point. Like, he spoke in riddles and half-truths and wore sunglasses in interviews and was kind of an impenetrable person. And anyone who wants to really try to get inside of whatever the hell was going on there, be my guest. I can assure you that it is not this movie that is going to do that. And also, John Logan is an incredibly talented, prolific screenwriter. Antoine Fuqua is an incredibly talented director. And the only reason either one of them is here has to be money. And they should both be very financially secure. Like, John Logan, are you in trouble with the mafia? And do you need me to set up a GoFundMe for you? I will.
Blink twice.
Yeah, blink twice for me if you are having money trouble. I will get you the American way of getting money to cover things, which is asking strangers on the internet. I want to step up a little bit here for Jordy Chandler, who is called a liar. And the 12-year-old boy was going to be the villain of the third act of the film. His family is called Money Grubbers. They did eventually settle with him, and Michael was able to admit no wrongdoing. And then they got to like go away and shut the hell up forever. And if you have looked at the media at some point in the last 5 years, you will know why they settled. Like, as an example, Jonathan Depp is an adjudicated abuser of his ex-wife, Amber Heard.
If this is your first time listening to this show, we refer to that actor as Jonathan Depp here in order to divest him of a little charisma.
Yes, thank you for clarifying that. Like, Jonathan Depp has such a cult of personality around him. Even now, like, women who clearly want to rescue a man with rotten teeth and think alcoholism is romantic, like, they found it easier to believe that Amber Heard was a sociopath who was secretly sniffing cocaine out of a tissue while she was on the stand than to believe that Jonathan was abusive. And that's Jonathan Depp, who is not the celebrity that he once was. He is not at the height of his powers. I want you to imagine the machine as I explained above, all of that money going after you. You would be at the bottom of the LA River, which is to say you would be thrown out of a helicopter and dropped onto wet cement, being driven over by Ryan Gosling and Drive. Like, ruining his life is not even a sufficient description of how things would have worked out for Geordie. Like, do you want to take on Sony and Michael Jackson at the height of his power? No, you don't. And the copium around Michael Jackson and these allegations is very real to this day. I was on Reddit yesterday trying to find out, like, a good journalist, which I am not. I'm not even a journalist, whether there were any strong counter arguments to his most recent accusers, James Safechuck and Wade Robson, who gave very detailed allegations in Leaving Neverland. And those arguments that people have against them are not great. I saw one about how one of the boys described Michael's hair texture incorrectly to this person's opinion. And that was all the proof they needed. Do what you got to do to get by in 2025. I know we live in hell, but like, I need a better defense than because people lie all the time about sexual abuse, which they don't. How the fuck do you know? False allegations of child abuse are very rare. And when they say unsubstantiated, it doesn't mean that it's a lie. It means it's too difficult to prove. Studies show median time to disclosure ranges from 15 to 20 years after abuse takes place. And all of this to say, this shit's complicated and we should listen to victims before we choose to protect wealthy predators. In the thank God for small favors, I guess, category, we're being spared this third act.
Back to that first spoken line to Quincy. The nose in this scene on the Thriller era Michael looks like a Muppet toucan, and I think they are intentionally exaggerating the nose in early scenes to make the argument that the plastic surgeries were not that bad, or because they can't whittle Jafar Jackson's nose down in tandem to Michael's without resorting to the CGI methods used for Walton Goggins to play the ghoul on Fallout, and they need to give themselves something to carve back from.
Does this nose, have we finally found a nose that violates your love of prosthetics?
Yes, we finally met a prosthetic nose that we could hate together. It looks fake. It still doesn't look like early 80s pictures of Michael Jackson. And for once, I am with you on hating a prosthetic. And just trying to piece together some of the things in that trailer, just these split-second flashes. I think I saw moonwalk, I saw spins. We go through era whiplash.
I do think, and this is a serious statement here, I think that the dance sequences will probably be spectacular.
Well, safe to say we will see where the money went on the screen, which is not, as we've seen, is not always enough to carry one of these things. And then there is a big gold title flash and credits. So subtracting the titles and credits from this 72-second trailer, they managed to derive slightly over 1 minute of trailer-worthy footage from nearly 2 years since the start of production. Out of a purported 3.5-hour runtime that at one time was reported as 4 hours, or they were going to split it into a two-parter like Wicked, or that third thing in the Hunger Games trilogy, which is now a quartet. I don't
I'm
know.
sorry. 3.5 hours?
Just over 60 seconds were deemed tantalizing enough for a trailer. Sarah, can you please explain the math here?
No, you just 3.5 hours? No, I
But
won't.
that out of 3.5 hours, barely over a minute was deemed trailer worthy.
I won't. I can't. I am afraid. They may not
Oh,
even have a movie together yet.
maybe the cameras weren't running the whole time.
I got nothing. I don't know what to tell you about this.
There was no scene we could settle into a bit, or there was no charming thing of people we have an image of in our heads just having an actual dialogue together. Because, yeah, you hear Quincy saying stuff, but it's not what I'd call a real, conversation. Do you have any insight into the production company situation surrounding this film?
The producers of this film include the previously mentioned John Branca, his lawyer, and John McClane, the other executor of his estate, along with Graham King, who brought us Bohemian Rhapsody and The Departed. Justin Simeon, who wrote Dear White People and is listed as a, quote, rumored producer on IMDb, whatever the hell that means. And it seems like Lionsgate is all the way in here, and I couldn't find any production companies that were scraping together laundered money from Middle Eastern shell companies. So legitimate.
And what I can deduce is that Michael is trying to do something that almost never works, which is to cram the entire life into a movie. We've said before that these things are much more effective when they hone in on part of someone's life.
Yeah, and there's ways they could dodge the third act child villain if they did decide to focus on the making of Off the Wall or the making of Thriller. But we're not doing that. So this will be fun to watch. 3.5 hours of and then. Anyway, so that's our show.
That's our show. I had expected that Michael Jackson fans would have already mobbed IMDb with 10-star reviews, but something must be preventing them from doing that. Basically, you cannot do a user survey at any music magazine because Michael Jackson fans will find a way to dive bomb that and drive his results up. Even if you want to do an industry survey, you have to create some wonky thing with a password, and it drives everyone nuts. So, because you will get the result back, and you will think there is no way that History is one of the top 5 albums of all time.
Yeah, those people are fucking insane.
Them and K-pop fans. So, other stuff that you should watch instead, the Thriller video.
Yep.
And then because we mentioned the Supremes in here, I want to recommend a Supremes B-side called Buttered Popcorn, which is a rare track with Florence Ballard singing lead. And when I get to heaven, there will be a version of the Supremes' greatest hits with a 3-way small d Democratic split on who gets lead vocals, which I imagine in the afterlife is a reward for Mary Wilson and Florence Ballard and a punishment for Diana Ross. And yes, I know it's easy to rag on Diana Ross.
She'll dry her tears in a pile of money. I would also recommend watching Leaving Neverland, which is a 2-part documentary on HBO that documents Michael Jackson's abuse of Wade Robson and Jimmy Safechuck, and presents a very credible, very nuanced look at what it is like to be under his spell and how Michael Jackson would groom an entire family and systematically move the dad out of the way, and really how complex sexual abuse is when you're captivated by your abuser. Also, I was reminded of this amazing special as I was researching this called Motown Returns to the Apollo, which I watched hundreds of times as a child. And it is so good. If you'd like to see a duet between Smokey Robinson and George Michael singing Careless Whisper, that's the place to do it. And we can link to the whole special in our show notes.
So that is our emergency bonus episode. I guess we'll be doing an episode on Michael sometime in the spring of 2026 or maybe the autumn of 2027. Who knows?
Yeah.
Sarah, can you please take us out?
I'd love to. So first, our podcast baby has matured, and we have launched a Patreon, simply an effort to defray some of the costs associated with bringing our show to you. Platform hosting, recording, equipment, research. We have to occasionally order a book off the internet. Sometimes we pay for movie rentals, and sometimes we may want to watch a movie in theaters, or we may want to pay public transit so we can see each other in person and record in the same place. So for now, only for now, we are offering shout outs and access to our awful first 3 episodes with more to come to anyone who chips in for us. And with that, we'd love to thank Brandon and Gates, who are already signed up.
Thank you, Brandon and Gates.
If you like the show, please leave us a 5-star rating and subscribe to it on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And tell a friend or plural friends and share us on social media. We hear it helps. You can follow us on Threads, Blue Sky, and Instagram, where we have visual aids from our episodes. Our Instagram handle is at Biopic a Podcast Story. So do check us out there, and we'll link to that in the show notes as well. Please also check out our webpage at biopicapodcaststory.podbean.com to see the official episode ratings for all of the movies that we've done so far. And if you would like to get in touch, you can email us at biopiclistenermailbag@gmail.com. And our theme music is by Ben Patch. The intro is his song, Slater Cannonball, and the outro is Spring Breakers, and you can check him out on Spotify.
Tune in on Tuesday or Wednesday when our regular weekly episode drops. We will be talking about the death of Stalin.
Yes. It's delightful.
Good night to the earnest and the cynical.
Good night, Rena.
Good night, Sarah.